I am walking in downtown Westfield, and it is on State Road 32, and it's just awful right now. I can remember back in the 90s when this was certainly a heck of a lot quieter, but it's going to get busier. So, topic of this video here, I'm going to start off with a little story. So a lot of this comes from a conversation I had not that long ago, just about the changes in Westfield, the changes in Indianapolis, the changes in Carmel, Fishers, wherever, Greenwood, over the years. Used to play this game on a super old video game console. It was kind of right around when Atari was out, but it was called Intellivision. And there were a lot of really cool games with it, but the paddles, the controllers are really different. We really loved it. We had quite a few games with it. And there's one game in there called Utopia. Maybe you know what it is. If you know what it is, let me know. Shoot a comment in there if you've ever played it. But you played another person. You could play the computer if you wanted to as well. But you had an island, and your opponent had their own island. And the number of people on your island just grew. You couldn't do anything about it. So day after day, year after year, the population just grew. So you had to take care of your population on your island. And it was essentially like you were competing with the other island to score points and make your population the happiest. So you had to go out with your fishing boat, find schools of fish in the ocean that surrounded your island and fish. And once you did that, you actually earned money. You could sell the fish, earn money, and then you could use the money to buy things or produce services for the population on your island. So you could get hospitals, schools, you had to grow crops, so you had all these little places around the island that you strategically grew the crops because storms would come through, rain would come through and rain on your crops. You had to predict where that was coming. And there would be bad storms too, like hurricanes, and it would come and destroy things, like the school you just built, or the hospital you just built, or it would destroy the crops that you just put into the ground. Now there are more complicated games today, one of which is called Civilization, and there's a bunch of others out there, but this was kind of the first one with that. And if you ignored your population, or you didn't produce enough schools, enough hospitals, and I can't actually remember some of the other things that you actually put in there other than housing, because you had to build places for people to live, they would rise up against you. They would actually hire rebels to begin taking over the island. And it was crazy. Whenever the rebels showed up, it made this horrible noise, and they would just appear on your island. And it was just gross compared to everything else that you had on this beautiful island that you were building. So you would try, like I said, to score points and beat the opponent, the other island, over a period of time. So ultimately, of course, you're building a utopia. That's what you were trying to do. And it doesn't sound like a super exciting game. For whatever reason, it was kind of addicting, it was fun, it was really cool to see how far you could go and how nice you could make your island and, of course, beat your opponent. So back to that conversation that I've had with somebody the other day and had with multiple people. Places like Westfield used to be very small. Indianapolis actually used to be much smaller. Carmel was absolutely much smaller. Fishers, Greenwood, like I mentioned before, Plainfield, they've all been smaller. The entire world has been smaller, the population. But the population of the world is growing no matter, regardless of anybody's opinion, whether you like it or not. I actually recently, for a birthday, got this glass. And on this glass, in my birth year, it had all these significant things, events, popular movies, songs of the day, that kind of thing. And it had the world population on there. The world population around then, this was back in the 70s, it was 4 billion people. Now, I don't know when you're gonna watch this video, but let's say it's 20 years from now, it's gonna be very different. But now, there's a little over 8 billion people in the world. So it's just growing, growing, growing. And people have to be somewhere. They have to live somewhere. So the population in the United States is growing, and people are, of course, moving a lot of times to places that work better for them, location, or they just want to be in that location because family's there, they have friends there, or their work is there, or they just like it and want to be there, so they end up moving there. when they do, it can get crowded and people can get disgruntled, that's for sure. So change has to happen. There are lots of people that are upset that Fishers is what it is today. Over 100,000 people. When you look 30 years ago, there weren't even 10,000 people there. If you look at Westfield, it's the same thing. 20 years ago, not even 10,000 people. Now it's pushing 60,000 people. People are going to places like Fishers and Westfield because they're nice places to live. Cost of living is really still reasonable compared to the rest of the country. The schools are really good. It's very family friendly, and what that means is it's just oriented more towards families. If you're 25 years old and you feel like Westfield or Fishers or Carmel are going to be super exciting for you, they may not be. They may be. It depends on your definition of excitement. But they're much more family oriented. So when they get more crowded, construction has to happen. It absolutely does. And I don't like it either, that's for sure. But the change is inevitable. So what Westfield was for a long time, even being what it was, very small for a long time, it was always growing a little. Noblesville, very small years ago, but it was always growing a little. And the growth of the world's population was also doing that. If you look 1 million years ago, 100,000 years ago, between those two time periods, the population was growing. But now we're in a time period where the growth rate is just much faster. And so places like this, places like Noblesville, Carmel, Fishers, they're experiencing that too, because they are super nice places to live. All this to say is that I understand there are people out there who will not like the change. They won't like what these cities have become compared to what they used to be, but the change is inevitable. And I will say that for the most part, it sure seems like a lot of these cities have their head on straight and they're doing at least mostly the right thing. Now, the right thing, of course, is a matter of opinion, but you have to meet the demands of most in order to, I guess, gain the most satisfaction from the population. So if you're living through some of these changes, like me or anybody else in this area, of course I know this construction is horrendous. I had to go from West Westfield to East Noblesville yesterday, and when I knew I had to do that, it was, oh, I couldn't believe it. You first have to get across the White River, then you have to navigate State Road 32, which you cannot. It's closed in one direction at any given time, so you have to go south or you have to go north, but so is everybody else. So it's not like it takes forever, but it sure feels like it. And it does add some time to the already distance that you can't get around. Distance is going to take what it takes, but when you add construction to it, it just gets worse. But you have to be patient. These are things that are going to accommodate that growth, that are going to make the growth easier to deal with and getting from place to place easier to deal with. But will it ever be super easy? Opinion, but probably not. When you live in cities that have a lot of people, even though Westfield I wouldn't consider it a big city at all, and most people wouldn't. Noblesville I wouldn't consider a big city. Carmel at a little over 100,000 people, I wouldn't consider a big city either, but they are large enough. They're large enough to create traffic. They're large enough to create crowds. They're large enough to cause some congestion here and there. So it's just one thing that you're never going to avoid if you live in any city with any significant amount of people. So imagine if some of these changes didn't happen, some of this construction didn't happen to accommodate all of that. There are places in the country and in the world where really almost nothing is done to accommodate the growth of their own population. Not even people moving to a particular area, but their own population growing. And if you don't grow with your population, can you imagine how bad that would be? You can probably go to some of those cities and see exactly how bad it can be. So in some of the cities that actually have room to do it, they have the means to do it, to accommodate that population. Some of this construction that can be so aggravating, in a year from now, 2 years from now, it will be not forgotten, remembered for sure, but probably appreciated that it's over, and then what's after it is usually pretty fantastic. Oh wow. So I just started up a street cleaner right here behind me. I've never had one right next to me just start going. That was kind of loud. I don't know if it was picked up on my microphone or not. There you go. So there's conversations that I have with people that just really hate on some of this growth. I understand, I know. Some of these small towns, super small places, but if they're close to a big metro like Indianapolis or some other larger city across the country, it's probably inevitable that they will get bigger. They will be swallowed up at some point. You have to be pretty far out there to still experience some of that really slow growth that we would have seen decades ago or even hundreds of years ago in some cases. So when you come to a place like this around Indianapolis, whether you're visiting or you're moving here, expect this. But look at it like a lot of things that seem so frustrating as an eventual positive, because a lot of that is moving towards that direction. I mean, really, it does feel somewhat like that video game. It feels like this little utopia, and we've really got to take care of this growing population and the congestion, the crowd, that's all gonna be here. And a lot of places really have their head on straight with that, because they're also creating these cultural hearts, these little cultural districts, and really neat places that you can go and enjoy while you're living in those cities. Like this Grand Junction Plaza right here behind me in Westfield. This thing is really super cool. But if you come down here and just get a look at it, it's just a total mess right now, other than the plaza itself, which is super awesome. If you have questions about anything regarding any of the cities that surround Indianapolis, make sure you subscribe to the channel, but also reach out to us any way that you know how. We'll always be happy to chat with you about those questions. And then when it comes time for you to move within or to any of the cities and towns around the Indianapolis metro, reach out again any way that you know how. We'll catch you in the next one.